We hope you enjoy this audio-only podcast. You can watch the full video versions on our YouTube channel at All Things Unexplained. There we share visuals, documents, and extended discussions you won't hear anywhere else. While you're there, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new video. But for now, enjoy this audio version of All Things Unexplained.
Warning: this video contains graphic content that may not be appropriate for sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All right, Unexplained ones, this is Dr. Mouse. Welcome back to All Things Unexplained. I've got some difficult updates for you today in the Melissa Casias case. And these include the results of her autopsy, and the details are frankly quite shocking. But first, I want to head over to Crime Junkie Podcast on X. You can follow them at Crime Junkie Pod. They tweeted out yesterday, Monday, August 10th, 2026. Breaking news: the gun found at the scene with Melissa Casias' remains belonged to her husband, Mark Casias. According to info, Crime Junkie was able to confirm with the New Mexico State Police on Monday. Melissa Casias went missing in June 2025 after failing to show up for work at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Her remains were found in May 2026 in a remote area of Taos County. We know her remains were found by a hiker in the area, and we know more about that now on the autopsy. And in terms of this gun, we also know that it was a black Springfield, but we don't know what caliber and what exact type of Springfield. We do not know that information either. Now, this reminds me of the Stephen Garcia case, and of course, All Things Unexplained obtained police body cam footage of the interview with his wife. And Garcia left the house with a gun, and apparently it was his wife's gun, and she actually reported it stolen at that time. So I do wonder if Melissa's husband, Mark, reported this gun stolen at the time. We do not have that information at this time, though. And now let's head over to Lauren Conlin on X. You can follow her at Conlin_Lauren. And on X, she gave some updates directly from her story in Los Angeles Magazine. And according to Lauren, early in the investigation, New Mexico State Police found information that appeared to cast doubt on Mark Casias' account of how he got to work the morning Melissa disappeared. Mark told investigators that Melissa drove him to Los Alamos National Laboratory and dropped him off around 6:15 a.m. But when investigators initially checked with Los Alamos security and reviewed license plate reader data, Andrew Goldie with Los Alamos security team could confirm Mark was at work, but could not verify how he arrived. They also found that Melissa's white Volkswagen Jetta was not detected by license plate readers traveling through Espanola or Los Alamos on June 26, even though the car had been seen with a consistent, roughly 20-minute time frame on previous workdays dating back to January. That apparent discrepancy was later clarified after police obtained a search warrant for more extensive Los Alamos records, including surveillance footage, badge scan data, and employee emails. On June 24th, investigators documented that Los Alamos surveillance did actually show Melissa's Volkswagen arriving at a guard shack at 6:13 a.m. Melissa was shown driving with Mark believed to be in the passenger seat. The Volkswagen was then seen leaving Los Alamos property at 6:20 a.m. That later footage corroborated Mark's claim that Melissa had driven him to work, while also showing that she did not continue on to her own normal route to work. But this is important, Lauren says, but this stood out to us in the report. Mark initially told investigators that he and Melissa had stopped at the Avenue gas station in Santa Clara that morning to use the bathroom and pick up a few things. Police reviewed surveillance from the gas station and determined that the Volkswagen was not there that day. According to the search warrant affidavit, Mark later changed that part of his account and said they had not stopped there. So that's interesting. What do you make of Melissa's husband here saying that they had stopped at a gas station in Santa Clara to go to the bathroom, pick up a few things, But then later, when police find out that did not happen, Mark changes his story and says, no, they did not stop there. What do you make of that? Let me know in the comments. All right, now it's time to review some of the autopsy results. These have been revealed by Crime Junkie Podcast and also Lauren Conlin on X. This is your final graphic content warning. This may not be appropriate for sensitive viewers. This is your last chance to back out now if you do not want to go over the autopsy results for Melissa Casias. So we'll start with the background on the autopsy. On May 28, 2026, Field Deputy Medical Investigator Christopher Martinez was contacted by New Mexico State Police about skeletal remains located on McGaffey Ridge in Taos County that had been discovered by a hiker. Now that aligns with previous reports we already knew about the hiker discovering her body. The hiker stopped to enjoy the view and noticed the remains on a rocky outcrop. The location of the remains was in a position that provided a view of the surrounding mountains. I'm actually curious about this statement here because it seems like the coroner is injecting their opinion of why Melissa might have went out there. I wonder if that is standard procedure. I need to get in touch with friend of the show, Patricia Cornwell, and see what she thinks about this. But I think the insinuation here is that Melissa found a spot, a beautiful spot with a view, and decided that this would be her final resting place. To me, that seems to be the insinuation of putting such a statement in the autopsy report. On May 29, 2026, the recovery group proceeded to the base of the nearest mountain, one mountain over from McGaffey Ridge. Using OwnX, a GPS app for mobile phones, the group noted they had traveled 1.6 miles from the staging area in just over 2 hours. The area has no trails, and the trip was walking through trees up steep inclines with loose rock and soil. Now, I feel like this is important to discuss here because this sounds like Melissa's body was found in an area that was very difficult to get to, an area with no trails, an area where hikers would not be at, and that she was spotted from some distance away by a hiker who just so happened to see her out on this outcropping. But previous reports had stated that not only had that area been searched already, but that it had even had workers in the area working at some point. Now, I think we've all seen areas that could be like this, out hiking, areas that are maybe marked off to the public or simply don't have any trails going out there, but if you could get out to some of these outcroppings that would be quite dangerous to go out to, you would be in a beautiful place. But reports were, this was even in People magazine, that her family said there will be more information to come, but what we can tell you now is she was located in an area previously searched. So what we really need to know here is, were people just in that area in general, like just generally speaking in the same area? Or did someone actually go out on a search to the outcropping where her body was eventually discovered? The implications of those details are very important because obviously if searchers had went out to that outcropping, if her body had been there leaning up against a tree, then certainly they would have discovered her. But given the fact that they did not find her remains at this time, what does that mean? Does that mean that she was out there on her own, surviving, evading people, maybe hurt or injured somewhere? Or perhaps that she had been abducted? And if in that national forest at all, maybe she was being held against her will. Or was she in the national forest at all? Again, the details here are really important, but we just don't know any more information at this time. The skeletal remains were leaned back against stone in a depression in rocks, with the left tibia, fibula, shoe, and sock approximately 20 feet away. There was a firearm near the body. FDMI Martinez noted that the left hand and left foot were absent, and also noticed the remains appeared to show signs of predation. The remains were placed in a body bag and transported to OMI for examination. So these are some sad, disturbing details here. The remains were positively identified as Melissa Casias, a 54-year-old female, via comparison of antemortem and postmortem dental imaging by forensic odontologist Peter Loomis on May 30th, 2026. So signs of predation. This indicates that she possibly could have been there for quite a long time. But again, we just don't know. I also just don't know if this makes any sense. Left hand and left foot were absent. And also, a firearm near the body, but we don't know how near. Left tibia, fibula, shoe, and sock 20 feet away. Does this make sense? We definitely need to talk to some more experts in the field on this. But for now, these are the details as we know them. Feel free to let me know in the comments. What are your impressions of these results? The coroner continues, on June 24th, 2026, I received an infant body bag from FDMI Martinez at the OMI front desk. FDMI Martinez and NMSP agent Mata had gone to the office of an attorney in Albuquerque who had received additional remains from a private detective in Taos who had searched the scene after the recovery team had left. We know that attorney is David Adams. I spoke to David Adams at length one day about the case. He is representing the family. They obviously do not. That particular day, I was clarifying with him about an orange pill that had been found at the site of the body. I was seeking clarification. Was this a PILL or PEEL? And it was the food item, an orange pill. And what had happened was the responding officers on the scene basically desecrated the scene, left food and trash at the scene. So a complete lack of respect for the deceased, for the scene, for crime scene protocols, a complete breach of those. And now we know, whereas her body was initially recovered on May 29th, nearly a month later, it took investigators, it took private detectives, and a search organized by the family to go back to the spot that she was found to uncover even more remains. And frankly, this is shocking. I've never heard of such a thing. Let me know in the comments if you have ever heard of such as this. I'm just stunned that those originally on the scene did not even collect the entire body. What in the world was going on at that scene? And it gets even worse. On July 2nd, 2026, forensic anthropologist Dr. Anna Medendorp met FDMI Martinez at the scene in Taos to search for further remains. All recovered elements were transported to OMI by Dr. Medendorp. Remains from all 3 dates were included in the same case number and are described here. The purpose of the forensic anthropological report was to examine the remains for evidence of perimortem trauma. This is the first I've ever heard of something like this. They have remains from 3 different searches. First set of remains collected May 29th. Second set organized by the family on June 24th, nearly a month later. And then a week later, approximately July 2nd, forensic anthropologists met them at the site to collect even more remains. This is just shocking, wildly shocking. So we'll move along. The next part in this report that we're going to talk about, it says there's evidence of carnivore damage to the remains at the distal end of the left femur and the proximal ends of the left tibia and fibula. Those, of course, are the smaller bones, your shin bones, and they're in the bottom half of your leg. The recovered shafts of the left radius, ulna, and metacarpals also show evidence of scavenging. It repeats, these remains have been identified as Melissa via dental imaging. The remains show projectile trauma to the cranium that occurred around the time of death. That statement is very interesting, and that's going to kind of tie in to what their ultimate decision here was on the cause of death. Let me repeat this. The remains show projectile trauma to the cranium that occurred around the time of death. The autopsy continues. The remains represent one individual. The skeletal elements absent are the mandible, sternal body, hyoid, cervical vertebra 6 through 7, thoracic vertebra 1 and 11, right rib 8, left rib 12, all carpals and phalanges of the left foot, the left first, third, and fifth metacarpals, the left medial and intermediate cuneiforms, and all metatarsals and phalanges of the left foot. The remains received on June 24th, that would be the second search of the area she was found, included the shafts of the left radius and ulna, shafts of 2 metacarpals, and a few small bone fragments. Wow, again, this is just shocking. So they left there on May 29th without the left radius and ulna, without shafts of 2 metacarpals and other bone fragments. That is just unbelievable to me. The remains recovered on July 2nd, this would be the third search, included cervical vertebra 2 through 5 and much of the left foot. All other elements derived from the original recovery on May 29th or 28th. This seems to be a slight discrepancy because it says the original recovery on May 28th. But earlier in the report, it did say that the hiker located the body or found the body on May 28th, and that on May 29th, the recovery group proceeded to the base of the nearest mountain and started making their way up. So I think they mean the recovery on May 29th here. But can you imagine the responding recovery group, the responding law enforcement on May 29th? Their breaches of crime scene protocols, just shocking, disturbing. And then the fact we know now that they left that scene without the radius, the ulna, metacarpals, other bone fragments, vertebra, and much of her left foot. I just don't understand how that could happen. David Adams told me that locals believe law enforcement does not take seriously these crimes that are happening to local indigenous women. And frankly, it's hard to look at a report like this and argue with what he's saying. They clearly did not take this scene seriously at all. They were eating at the scene. They left trash at the scene. It seems like they barely even searched the area. They left there practically without her left leg. They left there without vertebra. I am frankly disgusted at the results of this autopsy report and what it reveals about the actions of the human beings involved in this investigation. Moving on here, the report says there is projectile trauma to the cranium. The projectile entered the cranial base from the right side, damaging the left anterior side of C1 and the left side of the foramen magnum. The angle of entry was from right to left, inferior to superior, and slightly posterior to anterior. The projectile passed through the left petrous portion and exited the cranium through the squamous portion of the temporal bone. Areas of the parietal bone near the squama are missing. Both orbits are missing bone, and not all bone from the left temporal, sphenoid, or parietal was recovered. Of course, now we can't help but wonder, did they just simply leave the scene without everything? In addition to the documented skeletal trauma, it is possible that additional soft tissue injuries were present that did not impact bone. There is no evidence of antemortem trauma. And antemortem trauma means physical injury or damage sustained by a living person or animal before death. You know, this makes you wonder, how serious were they even in the original searches for Melissa? I mean, based on the way they treated the scene of her body, based on the way they performed their duties in recovering her remains and investigating the scene, it would be fair to think they may not put much effort at all into the actual search for Melissa. Might she have been discovered alive if this investigation had been taken seriously from the start? Who knows what evidence is completely gone forever now, given what appears to be a complete bungling of this investigation. Finally, we have the skeletal diagram. Forensic anthropological analysis of skeletal remains. It says projectile trauma to the cranium, and pay attention to the legend at the bottom. It says blue bones are the ones that were present or recovered at some point, and the white bones are absent. And actually, now that I think about it, this chart, this diagram must actually represent the bones that were present in the initial search, because we know that they did 2 other searches and did recover more. But no, I see where they do have the shafts here listed as present of the left tibia and fibula. So apparently there are still a lot of bones still missing, like much of the left foot, as we can see, much of the left hand, portions of the tibia, the fibula, even a portion of the femur. I see portions of the radius and ulna from the left arm missing. It's disturbing that they never discovered the mandible. I want to go back to Lauren Conlon on X here. She also said, a small amount of viscous red-brown material is identified in the skull and is not obviously brain material. And Lauren asked a great question here. Where is the bullet? Sadly, again, given the fact the initial responders left the scene and it seems they barely even collected the entire body, it doesn't surprise me that they did not collect the bullet. And as Lauren reports in Los Angeles Magazine, the Melissa Casias autopsy reveals gunshot wound, but mystery deepens as her death was ruled undetermined. So I feel like this autopsy result, instead of giving us answers, I feel like with the ruling of undetermined cause of death, it simply raises many more questions. Sadly, this case also has a lot of similarities to other missing Indigenous women in the area, some who are still missing, some who have been discovered, like Melissa. David Adams, who represents Melissa's family, also pointed me to another family that he represents, that of Lionel Tafoya. Very similar case to Melissa. She also went missing in the area. Her body was also later discovered. She was partially naked. She had 3 fingers missing. And it's my understanding the police essentially ruled this was natural causes. Her death was just the result of natural circumstances. Investigation over. I want to show you a video now from KRQE about the Lionel Tafoya case.
When the body of a missing mother from the Jemez Pueblo turned up in a ravine, her family had more questions than answers. They claim New Mexico law enforcement agencies botched a criminal case before it even began. KRQE investigative reporter Gabrielle Burkhart shows you why Linnell Tafoya's family is asking the feds to step in.
If you ask about her daughter, Brenda Tafoya will tell you.
She had a sense of humor. She was funny, always joking around, making us laugh and loving with her kids.
Her daughter, Linnell Tafoya, is more than a statistic, a hard message to get across when the 34-year-old mother of four went missing from her home on the Jemez Pueblo in August of 2021.
Told me, "I'll be back, Mom." She left. And that was it. She never came back.
More than a week had passed when Brenda got a call from a Pueblo police officer asking her to come to the station.
Told me that they found her body in Santa Ana, and I just broke down, telling me that she would have probably been in the ravine for maybe a week. They didn't really know.
So what happened to Linnell Tafoya between the Jemez Pueblo and where she was found here in Bernalillo near Santa Ana? Tafoya's mom has been searching for those answers for more than 2 years now.
She didn't do this on her own. Somebody did something.
One of the investigating officers, Bernalillo police officer Jeremy Navarez, has since been fired from the department after a domestic violence arrest KRQE reported on last year. But the day Tafoya's daughter was found in the Ranchitos ditch near I-40 in Bernalillo, Navarez responded to the call and wrote the police report. He noted her pants were down around her ankles, a cell phone was found about 500 yards north, and her backpack located further down along the trail on Santa Ana Pueblo property. Bernalillo and Sandoval County fire departments were called to retrieve the body. But the officer writes, as of now, no signs of foul play were observed or reported. End of report. The case is filed as an unattended death.
Extremely troubling to see the evidence in this case. I mean, I think the first signs of foul play was her being naked in the ravine.
Attorney David Adams claims authorities should have opened a homicide investigation. Potential evidence, he says, was mishandled and destroyed.
Gave me back her phone, her backpack, and thinking, well, don't you guys need these to find out what happened or go into her phone or anything?
Hoping another agency would dig deeper, Tafoya says she gave her daughter's cell phone to Santa Ana Pueblo police.
And unfortunately, in that process, the contents of the phone were destroyed.
Tafoya's attorney calls this case a jurisdictional nightmare since it involves the Jemez Pueblo, Santa Ana Pueblo, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the township of Bernalillo. A main reason, he argues, for federal investigators to step in.
This is an opportunity to kind of spread awareness about how many cases there are that aren't being properly investigated and to ensure that they get investigated by the appropriate agencies.
Adams sent a letter with a synopsis of Tafoya's case to the U.S. Attorney, asking his office to open a homicide investigation.
We have both, a very unique relationship with our tribal partners and responsibility towards them, and a unique ability to bring resources to solve problems.
U.S. Attorney for the District of New Mexico, Alex Ubaez, wouldn't speak about this specific case, but we know his office is looking into it. The Justice Department's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons, or MMIP outreach program, is a priority, he says.
As communities, as families and next of kin reach out, they have someone to reach out to.
Trying to bridge that gap and get these different agencies to cooperate with each other, to communicate, is a big goal of the program.
Elliot Neal is a full-time MMIP coordinator with the U.S. Attorney's Office. In cases like Tafoya's, Neal works with federal law enforcement and tribal partners to get answers, and if possible, hold criminals accountable.
Without some of the physical evidence, we're relying more heavily on witness interviews, things like that, circumstantial evidence, things like that, which is just as valuable in court.
The medical examiner for Tafoya writes, this is a complicated case. The possible causes of death include toxic effects of methamphetamine and drowning, or a combination of both. The official manner of death is undetermined.
Up until the last few years, through New Mexico and the Department of Justice, you see a lot more task forces being put together to help address what they consider to be an epidemic in itself.
Determined to help in this case, Adams points to a, quote, unusual finding in the young mother's autopsy. The ends of her fingers were missing.
Signs that would have suggested, further investigation.
Tafoya's mom, who's now caring for her young grandchildren,
I'm the grandma, yeah, but nobody can replace their mom.
just wants answers.
You don't believe it was just an unattended death?
No.
Gabrielle Burkhart, KRQE investigates.
Tafoya's attorney believes at least one of the suspects they've identified is serving time in federal prison, but federal investigators won't confirm who, if anyone, they're looking at in Tafoya's case.
We saw David Adams there. In that video, he represents both the Melissa Casias family and the Lionel Tafoya family. And I think you saw, indeed, there are many similarities there. And David told us that the locals, they know there's a lot of unusual things happening. And he says this all goes much deeper than what we know. That video ended with unusual findings that Lionel's fingers were missing. The ends of Lionel's fingers were missing, and Melissa essentially missing her entire left hand and left foot. Okay, Unexplained Ones, it's been a difficult episode with horrible updates in the Melissa Casias case and in the Lionel Tafoya case. I appreciate all of you. Let's keep these families in our prayers. Let's support the attorney, David Adams, who is representing both of these families, because I know for a fact that he's doing great work there. He's working really hard for these families to try to get to the bottom of exactly what is going on. I appreciate the support you've been giving the channel. You can hit the subscribe button to really help us out. Please comment on the video. I read all your comments. I try to reply to most of them, and I've been responding with voice messages on a lot of them as well. So let me know what your thoughts are on this case. If you have any updates we didn't go over, definitely put them in the comments. This is Dr. Mounts. I appreciate you tuning in to another episode of All Things Unexplained. Until next time, I'll see you later.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, will save for closed session.